What is going on, guys? Welcome back to video number 3 of the Foundations of Strength Training. Today we're going to be talking all about fatigue management, and I think that fatigue management has been the most important factor in taking my training and my clients' training from like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 to like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in the last year. I think it's that big of a deal. I think it can make as much of a difference as 10 to 20%. So pay attention. We're going to cover a lot of really good stuff in this video today, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So to start the video, let's try and give a definition to fatigue management. So fatigue management can be defined as the chronic planning of training. So you can think long-term planning of training to keep an athlete within parameters to where they are fatigued but recovering and not reaching a state of overtraining. Long-term fatigue management is going to be accomplished through periodization, which the periodization is just the long-term planning of training with phase potentiation to essentially keep an athlete fatigued but recovering and not reaching that overtraining state. We know from video number 2 where I talked about progressive overload. If you didn't see that video, go ahead and I'll link the video in the comment section below. So go ahead and go watch that video if you haven't already. But we know that from that video that training needs to be overloading, meaning that it's hard, and it needs to be progressive, meaning that it gets harder over time. However, we can't just continually make training harder and harder over time, or we'll eventually overtrain, which is where fatigue management comes into play, namely periodization. So there's lots of different models of periodization, and generally speaking, it doesn't matter which model you choose, as long as you use some sort of a model to manage your fatigue. So let's say you have anywhere between 4 and maybe as many as 10 weeks of progressively overloading hard training all in a row. And eventually you get to a point where you're not recovering. So what are you supposed to do then? Well, first let's define what recovering means. Recovering means that you are not able to produce an overloading session. So you're either not able to match the reps with the same weight, or you're not able to produce more reps with a lighter weight, or you're not able to produce some sort of overloaded stimulus, however you as a coach or as an athlete wants to go ahead and define that. One of the easiest forms of periodization to use as an example is just linear periodization. So let's say you're going to do a 300-pound squat for 3 sets of 5 in week 1, and then 4 sets of 5 in week 2, and 5 sets of 5 in week 3, and each week you just keep adding a set. Well, eventually you'll become so fatigued that you won't be able to match what you did the previous week. So one week will come and you won't be able to do sets of 5. In that case, you have sort of reached the point where fatigue management needs to come into play. Well, one idea that you can use is a deload week. So a deload week is a period of light training that's also done with lower training volumes, and you'll implement it every 4 to 10 weeks depending on your training goal. If you're training with very high volumes, this might be every 4 to 6 weeks, if you're a bodybuilder, for example. But if you're more of a strength athlete, you're training with lower volumes and just higher intensities, you can probably get away with doing it more so every 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. And for a deload week, this isn't just like a complete week off. It's also not extremely easy training. My general rule of thumb is to use about 2/3 of your normal training volume and then about 80 to 90% of the intensity. So if on average you're doing 12 sets a week for a body part, for a deload week, you might only do 8 sets a week. And if on average you're training with 70% of your 1 rep max, you might only do 62.5% of your 1 rep max, something along those lines. And you'll see when you get to a deload week that it's not going to feel extremely easy. and that is perfect. That means that you earned a deload week with progressively overloading hard training, but also that you timed the deload week just in time. Because if you had done another 1 or 2 more weeks of really hard training, that deload might not have been able to save you from overtraining. Another idea to kind of prolong having to take that deload week is to incorporate light training sessions. So this is especially applicable in more intermediate and advanced trainees where they need a lot of volume to continue to improve and progress, but they can't always get that volume with super heavy weights. So one of my athletes, for example, he can deadlift 700 pounds, and we've noticed that he just can't do overloading deadlift sessions every week. But if he doesn't do some sort of deadlifting every week, he tends to lose a little bit of technical proficiency. So what we've decided to do is we only deadlift once a week, and we alternate heavy weeks. So 1 week he'll deadlift heavy, the next week will be lighter weights, but heavy enough to continue with that technical proficiency. And then the next week we'll go back to another overloading session. And that's enough to keep him progressing, but it also keeps him from regressing with the technical proficiency aspect, and it allows us to kind of prolong how often we have to deload. So this is a very common thing that's done in daily undulating periodization, where you might have a day where you do 4x8, that's a really hard day. And then you might have a day where you do 4x4, that's also a really hard day. But then you might have like a kind of easy day where you do 4x6, but it's at kind of like a super low percentage, like it might only be 65%. And 4x6 is 65% is nothing, it's a super easy day. But it accumulates you more volume, it's at heavy enough weight that it gives you some sort of positive stimulus, but it also will help you actually aid in recovery, and it can help you build that technical proficiency in a lift that you need work on. So light days and deload weeks are going to be your best bets to work on long-term fatigue management. So that's it, guys. I know that we talked about a lot of different topics, but fatigue management covers a ton of different things. The most important things is that you're implementing some sort of periodization into your training program, and that you're using a bunch of different techniques to try and mitigate your fatigue accumulation over time. And if you can do that, then that means that you get to do more hard training. And we know that hard training that's specific to your goals is going to be the best training for you. And fatigue management is just going to allow you to do more of that. And ultimately, that's what we all want. We all want to just be able to train hard longer and longer periods of time. But you're not going to be able to train hard forever. And if you do try to train hard forever, you're bound to get hurt. So that's why this is so important. And that is why it's strength training principle number 3, fatigue management. I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you like the video, please leave the video a thumbs up. Comment below if you have any further questions. I would love to get to those. And I'll see you guys in the next video.